9/11. There was talk of retaliation against the Taliban and Osama bin Laden, of taking the war against terrorism to Afghanistan, and of suitcase-sized nuclear bombs. Yet the Doomsday Clock was not reset immediately. Why?
Since 1945, there have been an estimated 2,045 nuclear weapons tests worldwide. That's the equivalent of one test every 10 days for the last 60 years. The Doomsday Clock will return in a moment.
September 11th, 2001. Hijacked jetliners hit the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon outside Washington, D.C. A fourth hijacked plane crashed into a field in Pennsylvania. Trading on Wall Street stopped. The Federal Aviation Administration halted all flight operations at the nation's airports for the first time in U.S. history. The U.S. military was placed on high alert. Hundreds of New York City firefighters and police officers sent to rescue World Trade Center workers died when the towers collapsed. In all, nearly 2,800 people died. But the Doomsday Clock did not budge.
Many people, judging from the emails and phone calls that we got, were very concerned and wanted to know if the clock would move, and we had to explain, as I'm explaining now, that the board wanted to take some time and see where things were going. The attacks themselves, of course, were very significant, but what would happen as a result? How would policy change? Would there be a war? Were there going to be future attacks? These were all questions that were raised.
We don't tend to respond instantaneously to events, and the extent to which they represented a true, long-standing change in global security certainly wasn't clear then.
In the months following September 11th, an increased risk of nuclear terrorism by Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups filled the news. Finally, in February 2002, the clock moved closer to midnight by 2 minutes, 7 minutes to doomsday. The 2001 war in Afghanistan was an important reason.
That, in fact, did factor into our decision to move the clock back in 2002 to the original time at which the bulletin clock was set, very first time.
What will it take to move the clock through the world's next crisis? And in which direction?
I have no reason to believe that the clock will move anytime soon, but on the other hand, I have no reason to believe that it won't. The board talks frequently.
We're looking at the balance of nuclear power among the superpowers. We're looking at nuclear weapons development. And we're also looking at a range of broader security issues having to do with conventional, non-nuclear weapons and stability and security. We don't issue votes. We don't talk about who said what. And that's quite deliberate, because this is a decision that's arrived at by a group of people.
Board members see the job as history-making and take it very seriously.
What happened, and it really happened inadvertently, is that the clock became part of history. And so the responsibility that's attached to that is huge. These are some of the most serious discussions I ever engage in, the discussions about the clock.
I got an email from somebody saying, couldn't we make the world safer by moving the minute hand back? As if the clock itself was controlling the fate of the world. And I wrote back and I said, I wish that were the case. But unfortunately, the clock responds to world events. It doesn't control them.
In the post-9/11 era, the clock's ticking sounds a new urgency.
This is an extremely critical time in history. We are climbing down from the first great wave of proliferation that began after World War II. The bad news is that there's a group of countries, friends and foes, that are now interested in acquiring nuclear weapons. The clock, more than any other symbol I can think of, is a public warning system to say that, look, something serious is happening here. Stop what you're doing just for a minute and pay attention to this.
The superpowers have stepped away from their launch buttons, but threats from North Korea, continuing hostilities between India and Pakistan, and pressure by terrorists keep the world on edge. The nuclear age is just over half a century old, hardly a grain of sand in the hourglass of civilization. The future of the Doomsday Clock depends less on the hands of time than on what deadly weapons fall into the hands of people.
The clock, it's a simple reminder that while we're talking, those 30,000 nuclear weapons could be used at any time, that half of them are on constant alert, and that this is a constant danger.
One side or the other could initiate the use of some of those, and the other side would almost certainly respond with nuclear weapons. And where would it end? Nobody has ever been able to convince me that they knew how to stop a nuclear war once it started.